Deep in the land of the hollows and creeks, if and you get lost for weeks. Listen to the tale of a man who got lost 100 feet under the winter frost.
Now Floyd was a reasoning man. He knew what he wanted and he had a plan. He was just as smart as he was brave. He was gonna find him a perfect cave. Even Floyd knew something wasn't right. He was suffering nightmares at night. But he didn't worry about what he dreamed. Things was going good, or so it seemed, when looking for his fortune under the ground.
Sure enough, his fortune is what he found.
Hi everyone, my name is Andrew Stevens Purdy. I am a senior at Elon University, and welcome to Art Without Eyes, the process of creating a podcast musical. So, in addition to being a music theater major at Elon, I am an Elon College Fellow, and that is a 4-year program that culminates in a large research project. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about today.
You ready for the lowdown, the real straight poop? Here comes the mother load scoop.
The central question that I sought to answer with this research is, how do we make musical theater more accessible to different demographics? I believe that this is important for several reasons. The first being that for a musical on Broadway, the average ticket price is over $100, and that number can go up to several $100s for some of the more popular shows. That is one way that people who are not of a certain socioeconomic status are excluded from seeing Broadway theater whenever they want to. Also, professional theater in the US typically is centered in large cities, so that excludes a certain population who might live in rural areas who won't have access to professional theater as much as people who live in urban areas. Something that connects to this question that has actually arisen in the past month is that in a world of social distancing, none of us can go to see live theater. I believe that it is our duty as artists and scholars to create these new innovative ways to share our art with as many different types of people as we can. It is also important to note that I am by no means one of the only people exploring this question. There are existing podcast musicals such as 36 Questions and 21 Chump Street by Lin-Manuel Miranda. And there are subscription streaming services such as Broadway HD, which features video recordings of live theatrical performances. Also, the Williamstown Theater Festival here in Massachusetts recently announced that their summer season will now be released as a series of audiobooks, including A Streetcar Named Desire, featuring our queen, Audra McDonald.
If I follow that sound, I could find what I'm looking for.
To answer this question, I decided to create a podcast musical version of one of my favorite musicals, Floyd Collins. And this process for me was an exploration of how we can take an existing work of musical theater, such as Floyd Collins, and reimagine it and present it to a broad audience in an innovative format. Also, my objective with this research was not to release the podcast on a public platform and make money off of it. Rather, I hope that my process will inspire other artistic scholars to continue the work that I'm doing and reimagine other works of theater into other innovative formats, all in an effort to reach a more demographically diverse audience.
Long as you remember that from nightfall to daybreak, from sundown to dawn.
Although I was not even a student at Elon University until 2016, my journey with this project actually began 2 years prior when I was in high school. I was driving to school, bopping along to Audra McDonald's solo album because I am such a nerd, and I came across the song How Glory Goes, which is the closing number in Floyd Collins. And I just thought the song was really beautiful and incredibly interesting. And so from there, I found the show, and my jamming to Audra McDonald's solo album on the car ride to school became me jamming to Floyd Collins on the way to school. And ever since then, I haven't really stopped listening to Floyd Collins. So the music was kind of what first brought me into the show. So a bit of background about the show Floyd Collins. It was written by Tina Landau, who wrote the book, and Adam Guettel, who wrote music and lyrics. And the first production premiered in 1994. 2 years later, it opened off-Broadway at Playwrights Horizons, where it had a short run in New York City. Although it did not enjoy a lot of commercial success, it is largely regarded as having a musically rich score and being a really interesting piece of theater about a non-conventional subject. So it's actually based on the true story of a man named, you guessed it, Floyd Collins, who was living in rural Kentucky in 1925. He was an avid cave explorer during a time known as the Cave Wars, when different cave explorers in the region were competing to find the biggest and best cave to open as tourist attractions as a way to make money for themselves and their families. Floyd discovered this beautiful cave underground, and on his way out, he was trapped in the cave. The musical follows his rescue mission, it follows his relationships with his family, and it also follows what became the nation's first big media circus. It was the first time that an event had caused such nationwide attention. There were reporters from all across the country coming to this small town in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky, to see what was going on and to report back to places as far away as San Francisco, New York. Unfortunately, the rescue mission was unsuccessful and they were not able to rescue Floyd before he passed away. So clearly it's not the happiest of musicals. However, there are lots of beautiful, funny, and heartwarming moments that happen within the show. Most of the characters in the show were real people, so when doing my research, it was really interesting to see photos of these real life people and learn more about their lives. If you're interested in learning more about the true story of Floyd Collins, I would recommend looking at the book Trapped: The Story of Floyd Collins by Robert K. Murray and Roger W. Brucker. Definitely a great source if you have some extra time during quarantine and you're looking to learn more about the subject.
And as one sweet soul to another.
Now, I know that I want to work with Floyd Collins. I don't know what to do with it. I didn't want to just stage a production of it. I wanted to do something more with it. How can I find a new way to present it? How do I take this piece that not a lot of people know about and share it with as many people as I possibly can? This led me to my question that I talked about. My first idea back in the day was to create a film version, which upon second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh thought, I realized would be a bit of a large undertaking for someone who has no prior experience in creating films. I went back to the text, looked at it again, and thought, what does this lend itself to besides being performed as a live musical? And then I realized the media has a huge part to play in the story of Floyd Collins. Obviously, radio is not currently the most hip form of communication. So I thought, what is kind of today's parallel to radio? And we decided that that was podcasts. Then we said, I wonder if there are any podcast musicals out there. We found many podcast musicals, including the two I talked about earlier, 36 Questions and 21 Jump Street. So I listened to those, kind of got a feel for what a podcast musical is, and I decided I want to create a podcast musical version of Floyd Collins. And that's how we arrived at that plan.
I'm a calling.
Before there were podcast musicals, and before there were podcasts altogether, there was radio drama. Radio drama was a form of entertainment that began in 1923 when the BBC in England broadcasted 3 different scenes from Shakespeare plays over the radio into people's homes. This format took off from there, and it quickly became one of the world's most prominent forms of entertainment, and it maintained this status for several decades. However, with the rise of the television, radio drama became obsolete. But more recently, this concept of radio drama has been revived with podcasts. Podcasts cover a wide array of genres, one of them being musicals, which a podcast musical is basically a modern reinvention of the radio drama. are lots of reasons why I believe that Floyd Collins lends itself perfectly to being a podcast musical. For starters, in 1924, the first play that was written explicitly for radio, which was called A Comedy of Dangers by Richard Hughes, actually tells the story of people trapped in a mine shaft underground in complete darkness. And at its core, Floyd Collins tells the story of a man trapped underground, completely blind from the outside world. So there's clearly a connection between the first play that was written for radio and the story of Floyd Collins. As I mentioned before, this event became the nation's first big media circus. In Murray and Brucker's book, they mention how this was the first non-political event in which radio played a key role. So I thought it would be interesting to parallel that experience that radio listeners were having in 1925, and now, almost 100 years later, translate that into a similar experience by relaying this story through a podcast. Another reason why I think that Floyd Collins lends itself so well to being a podcast is that in its original production, James Chouette's set design was intentionally minimalistic in order to allow the audience to create this world of the cave in their minds. This is something that Scott Miller in his book Rebels with Applause talks a lot about, and he talks about how Adam Guettel specifically wanted the set design to be minimalistic in order to increase the audience's engagement in the story. When listening to a radio drama or a podcast musical, the audience must create the world of the story in their minds, which is exactly what was intended in the original set design. My personal favorite reason why I thought that Floyd Collins lent itself so well to this format is that Adam Guettel's score is so rich with musical cues about what is going on in the story. He incorporates the use of musical motifs or recurring musical patterns into his score to represent themes that are important in the story. For instance, throughout the show, Floyd is searching for his glory. We as the audience are never 100% sure what he means by glory, but we do know that whenever he nears this idea of glory, there's this musical motif of echoing that appears. Now, throughout the show, he uses his voice to call into caves, and if he hears this echo, that means he's found an open, cavernous space. But this echoing also appears during the avalanche that happens in Act 2. He hears echoes of his sister calling to him. This motif appears in its grandest form at the very end of the show, at the end of the number How Glory Goes. In this number, Floyd is asking questions about what is going to happen after life and what heaven is going to be like. He also sings the lyric, "Only heaven knows how glory goes." So what this says to us as the audience, combined with the fact that the echo motif appears right after this, is that his definition of glory can only be discovered in heaven. This is just one example of many musical motifs that Adam Guettel uses to advance the story of Floyd Collins. In his book, Rebels with Applause, Scott Miller also talks about how Adam Guettel uses two distinct styles of music to help tell the story. When the action is happening above ground, we hear a much more authentic Americana bluegrass style of music.
Good news around the bend, troubled days is gonna end.
However, when we are down in the cave with Floyd, the music is much more eccentric and almost ethereal, which accentuates Floyd's imaginative, adventurous, but also rapidly deteriorating mental state. And the fact that so much of the storytelling takes place in the score is truly a testament to how this musical can really be enjoyed just by listening to it. I have done a lot of talking, and so now we're going to take a quick break, and in the meantime, please enjoy the brilliant Grace Ann Contact as Nellie Collins singing my personal favorite song from the show, Through the Mountain.
I'ma walk you through the mountain on a bearskin rug, through the great halls you dream of, and tell of so often. I'ma keep you just as warm as a good night hug, as we fall along the diamonds to the outside. You can take me on a tour of the Emerald Towers, to the spires of sapphires and waterfalls of crystal. We'll lay down to sleep with the gypsum flowers, as we fall along the diamonds to the outside. Ooh, gonna get you out of there, to a land of babies dancing with the banjo in the air. And the sky is all lit up with lemons and roses. Everything from your head to your toes is warm. Listen to me now. I'ma walk you through the mountain on a bearskin rug, through the great halls you dream of and tell of so often. I'ma take you by the hand, and with a gentle tug, we'll be gone, we'll be long gone, as we fall along the diamonds to the outside, as we fall along the diamonds to the outside.
But he didn't worry about what he dreamed. Things was going good, or so it seemed. Went looking for his fortune under the ground. Sure enough, his fortune is what he found.
So now I'm going to talk about the process of actually conducting this research. As I talked about a little bit before, my project was conceived during my sophomore year at Elon with the help of my research mentor at the time, Professor Linda Sabo, as well as with the help of my current research mentor, Professor Valerie Mays. The spring of my sophomore year consisted of a lot of background research on what actually happened with the real story of Floyd Collins, the musical itself, looking into the history of radio drama and the difference between acting for a radio drama and acting for a stage performance, as well as listening to some other podcast musicals, including the two that I talked about before, the 36 Questions and 21 Jump Street. The fall of my junior year, I took a class with Professor Dan Calloway called Music Theater Literature. And as part of the class, I did an in-depth analysis of the show so that I could really understand every single moment of the show. This provided me with a lot of insight when the time came to direct the piece later on. Also at this time, I was continuing the research that I had begun in the spring of my sophomore year. This is also the time when I joined forces with our incredible music director, Kevin Lacey, class of 2021, and our audio engineer, Natalie Sakoi, class of 2020. Kevin Lacey, who is a member of the music theater class of 2021, had recently finished assistant music directing for Elon's production of Sweeney Todd. And if he could handle the score for Sweeney Todd, he can handle the score for pretty much anything. So I knew that I could trust Kevin with this beautifully complex score. I met Natalie during my first year at Elon. She went to high school with two of my closest friends. She is the first person I thought of for this job. Aside from Floyd Collins, Natalie is actually the co-founder of the Leading Women in Audio Conference. She's a huge advocate for women in the recording industry, and I would absolutely recommend checking out more on what she does. Another exciting thing that happened fall of junior year was the beginning of the casting process. The first role that I cast was Floyd. I knew that the role of Floyd was a massive undertaking, so I wanted to find someone who I knew I could trust to take on this role. That person is one of my best friends in the whole world, Mason Zaroff. A few of the other principal roles I had people in mind for, so I asked them and got them aboard before I started any sort of audition process. For the rest of the roles, I sent out audition information to students in the performing arts department at Elon, and the audition consisted of having people send in audio recordings of them either singing a song from the show or a folk song of their choosing. The most important thing that I was searching for when listening to these auditions was the ability to tell a story solely through the voice. Also, the beauty of casting a podcast musical versus a live stage musical is that traditional barriers of physical type don't really have to exist at all. This opened up the opportunity for non-traditional casting, which is something that was really important to me when creating this podcast. My winter of junior year, I took a brief pause from the project. I had the opportunity to study abroad in New Zealand, studying ecotourism and learning about the Maori people. And actually, while I was there, we had an opportunity to explore some caves. It was then that I realized just how dark it is underground. I would not recommend thinking about what happened to Floyd Collins while underground for 5 hours. During the spring of my junior year, I continued research and we started to move into focusing on the recording of the music. Originally, I planned to have piano, guitar, bass, drums, and harmonica. However, due to budgetary and time restrictions, we quickly realized that that was not possible. So we trimmed it back to just piano and guitar. I wanted to have the piano representing the underground, eccentric world of music that I talked about earlier, whereas the guitar represents the above ground folk Americana style of music. Also at this time, I applied for and received an undergraduate research grant from Elon, and this money, in conjunction with the money that I received through the Elon College Fellows Program, allowed me to compensate my musicians as well as Natalie and Kevin. At the end of my junior year, my research mentor, Linda Sabo, retired after an incredible career, and so I decided I would ask Professor Valerie Mays to be my new research mentor, since I had already been talking to her a lot about the music side of the podcast. Now we're in the summer of 2019 after my junior year, and this is when the first recording session happened. I actually was able to find a pianist here in my hometown named Scott Nicholas, and thanks to his brilliance and the generosity of the Encore Music Academy and recording studios, we were able to record the piano part for the entire show in just 4 hours, which is truly an incredible feat. Now we have arrived at my senior fall, the fall of 2019, and this is when we began the on-campus recording sessions. We began by having Alan Beck, an incredible guitarist from the Elon area, record the guitar part for the show. And just like Scott, he is a brilliant musician, and we were able to knock out the entire score in just a few hours. Also, senior fall is when we brought on Carly Hirsch, a member of the BFA acting class of 2020, as our dialect coach to help our actors with their Kentucky dialects and certain characters with transatlantic dialects. Now, unfortunately, there was not a whole lot of time for Carly to work with the cast, but thankfully, Carly was super efficient and was able to give our actors a crash course on their dialects. I am now going to turn it over to Natalie, who's going to talk a little bit about the process of recording and mixing the music for Floyd Collins.
Hi everyone, my name is Natalie and I am the record and mix engineer for this project. I am a senior music production and recording arts major, and Andrew first brought me onto this project November of 2018, and basically he came to me with the idea of turning this musical into a podcast, and it was my job to help make that a reality using the studios we have in Arts West. It's been an amazing experience, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the recording process to give everyone some insight into how we recorded and mixed all of these songs. So what you have here is the Pro Tools session for How Glory Goes, which is the last song in the show. Pro Tools is a DAW, or a digital audio workspace, that's industry standard, so it is also what's taught and what we use in Elon's recording studios. The piano was actually recorded somewhere else to save us time, so I imported that and did all of my edits to that, but everything else was recorded here on campus. We have two people in this song, Miller and Floyd. Floyd, aka Mason, is singing for most of the song, so that's who I'll be focusing on. We recorded all of Mason's vocals in 1 2-hour session. I did multiple takes with him, and then we all comped them together. This is very common when recording, so you can get the best parts of each song. If you can look at the vocal tracks, you'll see that there are different colors, like it goes from red to purple, back to red, or some greens and blue shades in there. Those are all the different takes that we comped together just to get the best parts of each section and line of the song. We also have the echoes, which are the bottom 4 tracks. Mason sang the echoes all the way through, and then I put a lot of reverb on them and panned them from side to side so that when you listen to it with headphones, you can really feel like you're hearing an echo in a cave. It'll go from your right ear to your left ear, and then another echo in your right ear, or one a little more towards center, and it just kind of allows you to really get the effect of being surrounded by these echoes and that sound. Something else I did on all the vocal tracks is Melodyne. Melodyne is a pitch correction software that can help correct places that go a little sharp or a little flat, but honestly, overall, it just polishes off the mix and kind of makes the vocals a little more crisp and right on the pitch. I also volume automated, so sometimes maybe the piano would be a little too loud, so I would turn the piano down and turn Mason up or something like that. This is something I did on all of the songs, and especially when we're working with the ensemble, which I'll get to later, you could turn them up, turn them down, depending on where you are and what you're doing. One of the biggest learning curves for me was working with musical theater singers because I'm used to working with pop singers. So musical theater singers have this huge dynamic range that's beautiful, and they're also really good with diction, so they're pronouncing all their P's and T's like really sharply. So that was definitely something during the editing process that I had fun playing with and learning about. So what you have here is the Pro Tool session for The Dream, which is the second to last song and also has the most people in it. Something that's important to note when you're recording is that the more people that you have, the more mics you're going to need, the more inputs you're going to need, the more complicated it gets. We had the whole ensemble in this song and several featured vocalists. So we were cycling people in and out in groups based on their vocal parts and based on who was singing when. And you can definitely see that here. I think bottom half of all of those tracks are all ensembles that came in and recorded in small groups. It was a whole production, and it was actually made for a very fun recording day, and everyone was so great and so on top of it and knew all of their stuff, which made it even easier. So what was really important here is what I did in the panning and the mixing. So because there is an ensemble and soloists, usually if you're seeing that live, you're probably hearing the soloist louder and then the ensemble is not quite as loud. So I had to mimic that in this session. So I was mixing the ensemble as one group, and then I was also mixing the soloists as one group and kind of layering them on top of each other. There are moments and notes that you're supposed to get from certain characters, like, oh, that line is important, so that line needs to be featured. That means the ensemble needs to come down in volume, and maybe I pan the ensemble so you can kind of hear them all around you, but the vocalists are more in the center of the mix, so they stand out to your ear more. So that was something that I actually had a lot of fun playing with and sending many drafts to Andrew, seeing what he thought, and also everyone has all of the same effects as before. They have Melodyne, they have reverb, they have volume automation, and all of that stuff as well. So they all sound cohesive and like they are existing in the same space. Overall, this was an incredible experience, and I had so much fun. Andrew is the best for bringing me on board, and honestly, I just had a great time. So I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the presentation and like what you hear.
As Natalie mentioned, we had a whole lot of fun in the countless hours that we spent in the recording studios, and Natalie was able to do some really incredible things with the music. One of these things, as Natalie and I have both mentioned, is the echoes. And so I'm going to play you a little bit of that echoing motif from a few different numbers in the show.
Do yo, 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 do
Natalie also mentioned the use of Melodyne, which is a pitch correction software. And so here's a little video of us having some fun with Melodyne. We're just playing with Through the Mountain right now.
So this is me taking your note from here to
There. Ready? Listen. It sounds good.
It actually sounds good.
Through the mountain on a bearskin rug.
She's a bass! Something that played a big factor in how we recorded the music for the podcast was deciding whether the actors should be in the recording studio singing at the same time, or whether we should have them do it separately and sing along to each other. A lot of this came down to logistics, but it also came down to what Kevin, Natalie, and I wanted each song to sound like. For instance, in the song Is That Remarkable, the harmonies are super tight, and so it was important that we had the 3 reporters, one of them being myself, in the recording studio at the same time, always together, kind of conducting each other through the song.
Is that remarkable? Is that remarkable enough? Is it incredible? I wonder what tomorrow will bring.
However, the Ballad of Floyd Collins reprise in Act 2 is sung by different people who were part of the rescue mission. I wanted it to sound a bit more raw and spontaneous since these characters aren't supposed to be trained musicians. So for this, I had each person record separately, and I didn't mind as much if not everything lined up perfectly.
He said, boy, thank God that you are here. Now I know my rescue is near.
Now, I would be lying if I said that the recording process went completely smoothly and as planned. Because of the coronavirus outbreak, we unfortunately were unable to complete recording the podcast. While we were able to record 95% of the music, the recording sessions for the dialogue were supposed to happen in early April, and unfortunately those were not able to happen. However, I am so proud of what we do have, and I think there is a lot of value in examining the work we have done and the work we were going to do. Another issue we faced quite frequently was scheduling. Now, Elon students, myself included, are notorious for overbooking themselves. During the fall, I alone was working on 4 different theatrical projects besides Floyd Collins. And so trying to find times when the studios were open, Natalie was free, Kevin was free, I was free, the cast was free, was nearly impossible. Another challenge is that the music is just really hard.
I want the animal or the banner. Let me know who's exact. Is this the bumblebee and Barnacle?
That's so funny.
I want the Alamagore and a banner. The gore's a possette. Give me the bumblebee and bird.
That last lyric was supposed to be Boise Gazette. Some of the music took a bit more time to record than we had anticipated, merely because it is so difficult. I am so grateful for Kevin Lacey because without him, we would have absolutely no music recorded. So recording the music continued into the winter and spring of senior year, as well as some rehearsals with the dialogue for the show. Before we had to leave due to coronavirus, we had a read through of the script with the entire cast, and I was so looking forward to having the chance to work with the actors more as a director. But unfortunately, the universe had other plans, and we sadly were unable to continue with this process. Another aspect of this podcast that I was really looking forward to including was the use of sound effects. I compiled various stock sound effects to represent different things such as rocks falling, the car horn from a 1920s Model T Ford, fireworks. That would have been a later step to include them once we had already recorded the dialogue.
See, I didn't know that's how it's done. See, that's funny, I didn't know.
Now, if given the chance to do this again, there are certain elements that I would do differently. The biggest change I would make is with scheduling. Instead of spreading the recording out over an entire school year, I would try to condense the recording into a smaller amount of time so that the actors would be able to really dive into the world of the show and devote their attention solely to that. This, in theory, would allow for more time for me as the director to work with the actors on the characterization and really adjust from stage acting to voice acting. And it would have allowed for more time for the actors to work with Kevin on the music and Carly on the dialects. So now I'm going to circle back to my original question. How can musical theater be made more accessible to different demographics? Obviously, in today's world of social distancing, this has become so relevant. So because we were unable to actually finish the podcast, it's difficult to say whether this podcast was successful in creating a viable alternative to live theater. Luckily, this has always been a learning process first. It has never been about creating a perfect podcast that we can share publicly and make money from. Rather, it was to examine the process and to see how this could be applied to future projects. And I do feel in that way that this project was successful. And if I ever have the opportunity again to work on a similar project, I will have a pretty clear roadmap of how to go about creating something like this. What we have pretty much created from this is a cast recording of Floyd Collins. As we've seen for many years, since Oklahoma was the first musical to have a cast album, these are a really effective way of allowing broad audiences to enjoy theatrical works. But this is something that we already did know, and so I wanted to expand on this by including the entirety of the book of the show, in addition to the music. An example of a cast recording that has allowed new audiences to enjoy musical theater is Hamilton. It actually reached #1 on the rap charts in the US, so it was accessing a completely different audience than a typical musical would. And hopefully it created musical theater fans out of people who may never have listened to a musical before. Art is necessary, especially when the world is going through a difficult time. So I am so proud to be part of a community that is being so innovative and doing their best to share their work with as many people as they can. We are seeing Zoom readings, we are seeing people sharing their work on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Shows are being released as audiobooks, video recordings of live performances. Now, on the other side of this, many people argue that live theater cannot be replaced by digital formats. And honestly, I agree, which sounds weird coming from someone who just spent 3 years trying to make a podcast musical. But I don't think that these formats should replace live theater at all. I think they should supplement it. These formats can continue to expose more and more people to live theater who will want to be part of this beautiful community that we have created.
Right beside you, I will stand. I will stand hard in hand.
There are so many people and institutions I have to thank for helping make this project what it has become. First, I'd like to thank the Elon College Fellows Program, the undergraduate research program at Elon, and my family for their academic and financial support of my project. Thank you to our musicians, Scott Nicholas and Alan Beck. I am so in awe of the talents that you possess, and thank you for bringing this score to life. I'd like to thank the entire cast of Floyd Collins. I'm gonna have to read this off a list because I don't want to forget everyone. Mason, Gracie, Brendan, Michaela, Cullen, Jalen, Nathan, Weston, Jaron, Eric, John, Tyler, Madeline, Emma, Hannah, Sydney, Leot. Thank you all for joining me on this crazy journey and contributing your talents to this podcast. Thank you so much to Carly Hirsch for working with us on our dialects. Thank you so much, Kevin Lacey, for leading the charge on music directing, one of my favorite scores in musical theater, and making it sound so incredibly beautiful. Thank you to Natalie, who put an insane amount of time into making this podcast sound absolutely incredible. I will literally never be able to thank you enough for what you have done. Finally, my incredible mentors, Linda Sabo and Valerie Mays. Thank you for your guidance, your creativity, your knowledge, your support, your love, your passion. I look up to both of you so much, and I feel like I have won the lottery having two incredible women guide me through this project. So much love to you both. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm so grateful to be a member of the theater community, and I appreciate all of your support. And now I'm going to leave you with the closing number from Floyd Collins, How Glory Goes, featuring Mason Zaroff as Floyd and Weston LeCrone as Skeets Miller. I hope you all enjoy it as much as I do.
Is it warm? Is it soft against your face? Do you feel the kind of grace inside the breeze? Will there be trees? Is there light? Does it hover on the ground? Does it shine from all around, or just from you? Is it endless and empty and you wander on your own. Slowly forget about the folks that you have known. Or does rising bread fill up the air from open kitchens everywhere? Familiar faces far as you can see, like a family. Do we live? Is it like a little town? Do we get to look back down at who we love? Are we above? Are we everywhere? Are we anywhere at all? Do we hear a trumpet call us and we're by your side? Will I want, will I wish for all the things I should have done? Longing to finish what I only just begun. Or has a shining truth been waiting there for all the questions everywhere? In a world of wondering, suddenly you know, and you will always know. Will my mama be there waiting for me, smiling like the way she does, and holding out her arms as she calls my name? She will hold me just the same.
The prisoner's body was wedged in so tightly there was no longer any room at all between its chest and the cave ceiling. A cave cricket perched on his nose, nibbling away at the tip. The doctors believe he died sometime on Friday the 13th, known as Hoodoo Day in cave country. The carnival at Sand Cave packed up and went home.
Only heaven knows how glory goes, what each of us was meant to be. In the starlight, that is what we are.